Right.
That means, why is everybody looking at me?
Unfiltered.
David is unfiltered.
Unfiltered.
It's dangerous.
I'm going to talk in stereo today.
Man,
Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I think we'll do a formal introduction in a little bit.
you should be sure.
See Sarah, yeah.
Hi, I'm good. Even though I say that, I've kind of mapped out.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Used to be a place called the Bombay Creek.
Here's a chart. Welcome to the Ellensburg City Council meeting of October 3rd. This is our study session, so that means just for the council and our guests, and we won't be taking public comment during this time. So I'll let the city manager
Thank
introduce
you.
the topics.
Thank you, Mayor. So we have 2 items on our study session agenda. And tonight, the first item is the Tourism Strategic Plan. A little bit of background. This study was actually funded by Lodging Tax and was completed in 2019. It was on the council's schedule agenda for March 16th, 2020. And there are other things that were happening at that time, and the plan got bumped. It was never adopted, and the conditions of tourism have changed over time. So as we look at the Chamber's agreement, they are our visitor center provider and handle our marketing. We asked them to come back and talk a little bit, give you all an update on the strategic plan, how it's been implemented, what has changed, what is sort of the state of tourism in our community, and how they see us moving forward with tourism. So they have a presentation that they've put together. So I would invite Amy McGuffin from the Chamber and Matt Anderson to talk a little bit about the tourism strategic plan. And then there should be an opportunity for questions as well.
Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Councilmen and women. My name for the record, Amy McGuffin, CEO of Kittitas County Chamber of Commerce. And we're excited to be in front of you tonight because, like Heidi stated, this plan kind of sat on the shelf for a little bit, although we took some of the recommendations and put it into place as far as the advertising is concerned for the last 2 years. And so I'm going to go over the presentation here. So let's see if I can. The goal of the strategic plan was to support a healthy economy and increase tourism. And as we prepared for this strategic plan, we weren't just focusing on leisure travel. We were looking at all travelers that were coming into Ellensburg and the extended area of Ellensburg. Ellensburg's tourism goal will start with the refining and the enhancing of the leisure tourism. So when we talk about leisure tourism, we're really looking at weekend travelers or those travelers that are coming in for a destination use. So mainly through your hospitality industry, your restaurants, your hotels, or events and festivals that would bring them as a destination to come to Ellensburg for a specific use and reason. The other thing that we had talked about in the strategic plan, which you did get in your packet previous to this meeting, was talking about new audiences. And as you have seen with Ellensburg in the last 10 years that I've been involved with tourism, we're ready to advance to new audiences through sports tourism and also meeting room That's a really important piece because sports tourism just enhances the leisure tourism, but then you get into the meeting tourism, which is conferences, summits, business travel. So we're looking at that Sunday through Thursday travel for our hoteliers and for restaurants and other activities. And so it was really defined by a group of people at the time that we thought by 2026 that we should be really heavy into these 3 places of tourism for the city of Ellensburg. Since the plan has been developed, we had that thing that came in 2020, and it really shut down tourism, especially the events. Restaurants were really impacted from this, and the meetings and sports. So really no one was traveling. Obviously you guys were there in real time, so you knew how it was. And so we had to advertently just stop what we were doing and focus on supporting small businesses in all factions, including tourism. So our website completely converted to having operation hours, pickup, drive-in, all of that information for these small businesses. So we were still getting travelers when it was first happening because we didn't really know what we were up against. And then there became a lull where there was nobody traveling, right? That was when the governor pretty much put a shutdown on the community. So in the meantime, we kept focusing on the positivity, supporting local, buy local. Even those that were still traveling for one reason or another, we still had those abilities for them to purchase on our website for a future trip. So we even encouraged them to buy local gift cards at our local businesses because at one point we were hopeful that it would open. And we did see a lot of support, not only from the community members, but those that really like to frequent into the city of Ellensburg. We had a lot of people call the visitor center, ask us how they can help and support the small businesses while they couldn't travel here. So we gave a lot of suggestions during that time. Also, the visitor center was a place to support the small businesses with the public health offerings, so masks, sanitation. So we really had a vital role in supporting the small businesses along with the grants that were going through the state of Washington. So we were able to give real-time information for these businesses and support them during the time that was really unknown for them. So coming out of what we call post-pandemic, we are heavy in our promotions of outdoor recreation, healthy lifestyles, and then we kind of embarked on the part of the plan, which is your cultural arts plan. There was a group of people that met together on a regular basis, and thank you very much. You supported a consultant to come in and help with that process because we do feel the creative industry is an important piece that we came out of the pandemic of, wow, this is a part of our grain of life, right? And so this group was able to meet and put a lot of man hours with this and come up with a pretty fantastic report. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the third bullet that I didn't go to the next slide about. And then I'll ask Matt to come up because he was really involved in that cultural art plan and kind of talk a little bit about how we're implementing this plan that was found in this strategic process. So with the shutdown of COVID-19, we obviously saw that events and LTAC applications were a little bit unknown. So with the consolidated process, the county was very graceful and in accepting and understanding, we don't know what's going to happen. So they actually extended a lot of the lodging tax applications to go into the next year. So they didn't have to go through the process again with the funding that they had. From the city of Ellensburg, we did see the ultimate decline of revenues, but you've bounced back in this last 18 months. So that's a really good sign that people were ready to travel after this experience worldwide. And so we just are excited about the changes that we've had in our area alone. You've had a couple hotels that have changed hands, have changed uses. They're no longer accommodations. They're more of affordable housing options. You also have had rebrand. So some of your national brands have changed. And so they've done a rebrand. And then you're about to embark in the long-awaited new hotel in the city of Ellensburg. So people are excited and are traveling quite a bit. So Matt, I'm going to ask you just to kind of continue on a little bit on this report, and we'll continue and go back and forth.
Thank you. And hopefully you can still hear me online. I'm battling a bit of a cough. Just want to circle back to the cultural arts plan. And I know you had a study session a couple of weeks ago. I don't want to spend too much time on it. But many parts of those plans are fairly labor intensive as far as what the outcome is. For instance, one of the first goals is the formation of the cultural arts district, and you've heard about that. Once that's done, one of the steps that we've already identified is we want to bring in other cultural art districts and have a summit. And that won't be the first time you hear that word tonight, a summit. Bring in other experts in and talk about how they're advancing their cultural arts plan and their cultural districts in areas that's already been established. That circles back one more time with that whole meetings tourism aspect, where we identify what we're good at or what other people are good at. And Ellensburg is an excellent place to bring in those experts, stay the night and discuss the topic and go farther. A good example of this is just last April, we hosted the Washington Events of Amy, help me out. Festivals and Events Association Regional Conference. And we took a page from Winter Hop and how we approach different venues. So what we did in that instance is our presentations were actually at different businesses within the downtown area. So we were at the Windrow, but then we broke out of the Windrow. We got ourselves into the Blue Rock and down in Fitterers and some other spots in the downtown area. And we're taking that model and we're using that for a portion of that meetings tourism that we've talked about, and these summits that we want to have, not just in Ellensburg, but also county-wide. Going a little bit as far as improving our online presence, this largely has to do with My Ellensburg. That's been our standout webpage where we drive our traffic to. From that, we have multiple social media accounts. Facebook and Instagram are the most prominent ones that we can use to not only promote various events, but we can also use it for community events, and then anything with a larger scale that may involve stuff happening outside of city limits, such as the Patch. You know, somebody may come to the Patch and do activities there, and then come into town and either lodge or dine, that sort of thing. Talk a little bit about our Visitors Information Center. We operate the one right here in the driver house. We share the office with the Ellensburg Rodeo. That's an important aspect that we use for a number of different items. One, people come strolling in from the farmer's market, or midweek across the street from Bruce's Place or the Hotel Windrow, and just have questions that they want answered. We can do that. We also provide a number of different brochures related to the area. Excuse me. And then we, at times, have acted as a box office for particular events. Most recently, we sold passes for the Kittitas County Fair. They were able to come to the chamber and get their carnival passes and whatnot. So having that visitor center is going to be an important piece of Ellensburg tourism. But realizing that tourism doesn't always happen specifically 9 to 5, having some sort of mobile kiosk when there's an event downtown specifically, or over perhaps at Rotary Park, looking at the viability of having a mobile kiosk that will still have various restaurants advertised or whatever else we choose to advertise. You're here for this weekend. Oh, here in a couple of weeks, why don't you come back and enjoy Labor Day? That's that sort of thing. I want to talk a little bit now about, oops, I'm going backwards, the sports and meetings, and that's a bit of a new direction. The sports is certainly an offshoot of leisure tourism. Leisure tourism, as Amy stated, is going to really be your weekend traveler. They're coming in to go to a concert at the Gorge and stay the night and have dinner. That's really kind of the leisure market. Where sports tourism differs, it certainly is part of that leisure market. Quantity, I suppose it'd be the better way to describe it. Instead of having to individually target 40 different people to come to Ellensburg to stay for one particular event or a concert or whatnot, if we were able to host a tournament or advertise a tournament, and now we've got 4 teams with multiple players, we've really just kind of consolidated our work. We got that large block that are going to come in. They're going to stay the night, typically for more nights. A Friday and Saturday tend to be the most common. And then you're looking at team dinners, right? So they either take over a pizza joint or a nicer dinner, and they're down in one of our restaurants. So where sports tourism certainly is part of the leisure component, it's quantity that really is attractive to us. And Ellensburg has some great facilities. Rotary Park has multiple fields. Lights are coming in. I think that's going to open up some new avenues for us when it comes to, in particular, softball. There's some other great things going on. In Cleellum, with the Pioneers Day celebration, Cleellum hosted a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. And it really got me thinking that, potentially there's an opportunity for Ellensburg to have that sort of tournament, whether it's in the downtown area or at Rotary Park. Those questions we're still just, kind of throwing spaghetti on the wall, seeing what's work. But that's the type of tourism that we're talking about when we talk about sports tourism, really bringing a chunk in at a time that we want it and selling more than one. Excuse me. And I've already kind of jumped the gun a little bit on the supporting the cultural arts plan. In the discussion with that group, part of the goals or what wanted to be done is to have specific portions, a website dedicated to the arts. So a place where somebody can go and not have to worry about where they're going to eat or what other winter hops going on, but really drill down to, I'm looking for an art show or I'm looking for a music presentation. So we think the chamber could play a role in that as far as development. We've got an excellent resource with our digital marketing organization, and those types of things takes man hours. Obviously, a lot of planning. Monica can attest to that as being front and center in that group as well. And then another one of their goals, frankly, in that plan is to hold some sort of arts festival. Now, this is down the road. This isn't necessarily happening in 2023, but it's coming, and it's a priority that cultural arts plan has identified. And of course, the chamber wants to be a part and lend support where appropriate. So that all being said, with the Cultural Alliance, with the desire to go out and actively recruit sports tournaments, ask sports tournament organizers to consider Ellensburg as a spot, we just feel that it's going to require some additional funding, via those lodging tax dollars. And the nice thing is, as we've alluded to with the market, the lodging tax dollars have actually really increased, not just in Ellensburg, but countywide. If you were to look at those line graphs, it's been encouraging, to say the least, to see that rebound after the decline that we all went through. Amy, would you mind coming back up? I'm sorry, I'm battling my cough.
So with this, the exciting part of approaching new audiences, obviously we're going to have somebody in the office that can have the expertise in speaking the language to those sports tournaments, and also the meeting organizers. And so one of the things in the strategic plan, the consultants did recognize that as you grow, you're going to have to grow with the demand or the audiences that you're looking to attract. And so this is an additional staffing that you will see in our request. We have been talking a little bit with Brad initially through the Parks and Rec, and trying to see if we can collaborate with him so we're not duplicating any of the staffing needs or any of the staffing requirements. And so we are being mindful that we won't create a position without the input of the City of Ellensburg staff, because we feel like they'll also be that part of expertise that will allow us to know what we're doing and where we're going. A lot of times in communities, this is a Conventions and Visitors Bureau role, and we haven't really discussed that about here in Ellensburg, but you do get to a point in your population that you may need to consider a Conventions and Visitors Bureau so that we can conduct these sales calls and these different type of actions when it comes to larger group of people and making sure that we're managing those groups effectively. The additional thing is we will probably need to implement a 5% year growth from the tourism budget. With that just includes a couple different things that we've come out of COVID. There's a few things that people are going to expect from an experience standpoint. So there's going to be some cost derivatives to those pieces that we have to conduct. So if we went to, let's say we had an example earlier that we go to digital platforms as far as touch screens, we would probably have to take in that consideration of the safety to that touch screen, especially if it's in downtown and people have access to that. The installation of some of those touch screens, along with the mobile, obviously by having a situated visitor center, people come to that visitor center, but once you have a mobile unit going, you're going to have some additional cost to get that mobile unit to the places of demand. So there's going to be a few growth requests that are going to be in the budget coming into this year. So, you know, believe it or not, this is the first time I've ever done a study session with the council. Can you believe that? I've never done a study council. So I
You've given
appreciate
lots
this
of
opportunity.
reports, though.
Huh?
You've given us lots of reports.
I've given a lot of reports and gotten some feedback with those reports. And so I look forward to your feedback in regards to this. So just real quick, talking a little bit about that staffing. As you can see, we have a little bit more description of what this representative would do. And it's really what we have found in the Convention and Visitor Bureau areas. This person takes all of the accumulative information and puts it into what we call a sales kit. So they have one point of contact, one confirmation, and a person that also works with your Parks and Rec and make sure that everything from an experience space is completed. And so the report from the consultants, J. Ray, had suggested hiring a part-time, so doing a phased approach, doing it part-time, seeing how that's working, going to a 3/4 time, and then potentially getting into a full-time status as of a position. This person also would be one that would help us with achieving the timeline that was put into this strategic plan. As you can see, we don't really need to focus on leisure travel other than a revival of leisure travel. So that's why we did put the revival there, because you currently are experiencing the rebound of leisure travel, but we need to revive them in the full experience of coming to Ellensburg, not just the destination that they can come and see us Sunday through Thursday also. 2023 is what we suggest at starting the sports and meeting tourism launch. And then as you can see, start getting into the creative assets. I do think the Cultural Alliance has a lot of suggestions for the way that this plan will go forward and going after the destinations. So we anticipate 2023 being that launch of that component of new audience. Then as you can see in the arrow of all of the other planned strategic timelines. At this point, we will let you come back to us and we can have that conversation if that's how it works. Is that how it works on this particular piece?
So are you ready for questions?
I'm ready for questions. Thank you.
Council, do you have questions? for me?
So this is somewhat to staff and somewhat to the chamber. And so at one of the previous jurisdictions that I worked for, city of SeaTac, there was obviously a lot of rental cars and hotel rooms, and they did targeted taxes that subsequently fed back into these kinds of programs. And I'm wondering, how many rooms do we have? How many room nights do we have in any given year? And, is that a way to potentially target some funding back into these services? Just a simple room tax.
So there are ways, when we talk about the Convention and Visitors Bureau, you can also do a designated, I'm going to go off the top of my head. I think it's called the TPA, Tourist Promotion Area. There's some particulars in the ruling of how to do that, but you can, with a population growth, you can get some creative funding along with the same audience, but it gives you additional funding on top of the standard lodging tax. So you could do it that way from a perspective of bringing it back in.
And I would just add to that, the TPA is actually a hotelier voted. They
Mhm.
vote to tax themselves, essentially. It's not something the city could implement. And we do charge admission fees and so for events and things like that. But right now we are at the maximum for the lodging tax. We do the 4%.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
So is there any kind of plan within here on building more infrastructure so that, say, for like rodeo event, I have family in California that would love to attend that, but they can never find a hotel room a year to two out from it. Is there a way we can start promoting more infrastructure to come in to support things like this?
So that's an additional responsibility of the chamber as the designated ADO for the county. We actually have these conversations. It may not be in this strategic plan specifically, but we are talking to branded hotels. There are a few that are interested in coming into the area along with the new one that is going to be opening soon. So I would say, yes, there is opportunity for infrastructure. We're also in those conversations with the rodeo and their planning of expansion and the properties within the, what's that called? A facilities plan that the county has for the fairgrounds. We do know that there's been some conversation outside of the box kind of conversation of what does the future look like for the rodeo grounds and where can we accommodate some infrastructure build. So we are in on those conversations. It's just not particularly into this strategic plan that you're seeing in front of you.
Thank
you.
Yes, I wanted to thank you for including the arts piece in this. When I first read through it, I didn't see that very much. So I'm glad that y'all adjusted and put that in there because I think it's going to be really important. I also wanted to make a suggestion when you do your surveys, if you could identify a little better your populations, maybe in terms of diversity,
Mhm.
Because CW, their graduations and their football games and things like that are really important. And we're trying really hard to be more diverse and more accepting and more welcoming. And so it'd be nice with your survey reports if we knew how many diverse audiences you're hitting with your marketing strategy. That would be helpful.
I appreciate that feedback. We learned that through the pandemic that we weren't getting some vital information. And so our surveys do include some options to where somebody can optionally express a little bit more of their demographics.
Great.
One of the items that we've looked at a couple different times and a couple different products is having a survey via technology. Let me try to explain this. So we can identify, okay, we have day one of the Ellensburg Rodeo, and there's technology out there that will essentially fence off the rodeo grounds, that specific area. And via cell phones, everybody's carrying them, right? Start having that sort of data, and anything that cell phone user has already identified that, demographic wise, and really have some very unique opportunities for not just the chamber, but as committees are coming forward and wanting to put forth lodging tax applications. And the question always has been, it's like, well, how successful has your event been in the past? How many room nights can we really count on you that you did? The data that's out there now is not just like data that you would get now. It goes back, I think 5 years tends to be the standard. So they could look at Winter Hop for the last 5 years and fence off, okay, they were here in this area of downtown, how many cell phones were outside of the area for that period of time? And what are the age users of those cell phones, or the male or female, or, that it's really frightening, but also amazing, the type of information that then we could use to make, not exploit. One of the examples that they used was they found that one jurisdiction was using the software and found that the people coming to their festival, like 80% of them identified themselves as pet lovers. So they showed for their event all the ways that their particular event was pet friendly, and their attendance went up the following year because they had that data that they were able to collect and use actively to enhance not just the experience, but also overall the success of that particular event. So I think that there's ways to certainly get out in front of people, but there are, I guess, passive surveys that may be available to us as well.
Thank you.
I'm going to add a little bit more on the incredible technology that we have. So this is very similar to the Canadian government, where they ping off of certain different things. And it can go as small as if a restaurant wanted to know who is coming to their restaurant at a certain time, you can pull that fencing specifically to an address, and we can tell them all of that data point and who's coming to their restaurant, who's doing different things based on their cell phone, because the cell phone doesn't stay in the car. The cell phone goes into the business, and then it pings off of that cell phone into that address. So we can really dive deep, which is where the scary part is, right?
So let me follow up on that. So is this 100% voluntary? Are people opting into this, or does they have to opt out of it?
It's
You need to come to the mic.
So the way it works, both platforms that we look at, on your cell program, you have various number of apps, right? And generally each one of those apps has some sort of privacy notification. Do you allow your, to use such and such app to share your location? And once you hit yes on that, then it's up. It goes to the data collecting gods in the sky.
So can I clarify, you're
Yeah.
not using these at this time?
We do
This
not
is
have
just
it.
technology that is out
It's
there.
out there.
Yeah, because I'm not really all that much in favor of using it
Keep your
without
cell
people.
phone in the car.
Well, I don't really care if people track me, but I don't want to know what other people are doing unless they have specifically volunteered that information. I don't care if it's good business.
Understood.
David.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate the presentation. I was curious, and I think you've answered this already. I just want to make sure I'm tracking. So the durability of the plan, it was a 20 to 24 plan. Fast forward at least 2 years from 2020 to 2022. So your projections in here go out to about 2024 in terms of your budget. So is it reasonable to assume that the plan's durable enough that we can push it out? I think on your last slide, you had a retool around 2027. Does that sound?
Yeah,
about right?
2026.
Mhm.
Yes.
So one question I had was on your budget, you outlined on page 27 of our packet. The assumption was that you started the tourism plan at 2019 plus $50,000. So that was 461 versus 411. So here we are in 2022, and aside from the fact it's 2 years later, costs, as we know, have gone up. So how, I guess, two-part question, how does that affect your budgeting going forward, number one? But then number two, you made an assumption that there would be, I understand, predictable pre-COVID, that LTAC funding would go up about 5% a year, reasonable growth based on what we were expecting.
Mhm.
So now that we've got, again, on your breakout, we've got 2 full years of data, 2020, 2021, and we're getting close to the end of 22. I'm just wondering if you've gone back in, and I think Matt mentioned that the lodging tax money is starting to look good again, it's starting to rebound. I'd be really interested to know how close we have come to the projections that were made. I know it went down.
Mhm.
Most of the data that I look at in 2020, COVID killed everything off for a
Mhm.
while, and then it started coming back. And then maybe in some cases it's rebounded beyond what 2019 was. So I was wondering about that, but more importantly, how it affects your budgeting going forward, because you're making some assumptions that, you're going to have growth, year over year growth at 5% starting at a point. So has that been recalibrated?
We have come back to reality, yes. And so we've been we've been talking to Heidi a little bit, and we're having a really good conversation. I would say you're probably on track of what our budget was in 2019 suggested. The city has been a really good partner. We've gone multiple years, a 2-year biennium contract, which has been really helpful because it's easier for us to manage that budget and also project into the next year, knowing very well that you've already accepted our projected budget. We would do the same thing, but what we have learned with technology and database, we should be able to create some more specific measurables for the council and give you a little bit more, not so high level of what our anticipation is, but really give you a real time perspective of where we're at. And so Heidi has requested that after this study session to come with a proposal. And so we've been kind of noodling some numbers. I've always been, the partnership is what's really important. So if I come out really high and the city gives me a different budget number, I can usually pretty well crunch it to meet the requirement of the budget of the city. Obviously, there are things that we would like to try. Rich, just like you have alluded, we're not really using that data. We know it's out there, but what does it look like? Do we do something different? So there's some things that we can be flexible within the budget that would then maintain the total request.
So related, I guess, you mentioned earlier about the idea of new part-time staffing
Mhm.
position. Was that assumption factored into the budgets that were prepared in 2020?
Yes,
So
it was.
The annual growth, that's assuming some increase in staff.
Yeah, that was the request plus 50 was the anticipation
okay.
of that
That was
part-time
that
person.
specifically.
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
One other question, as I summed through this, I was interested in the visitor strategy, and there was a lot of collaboration and, it occurs to me that over the years that one of the things that we've been struggling with is that we don't have a great menu of venues with lots of capacity, and I wonder if the strategy was sort of go forward with what we have, but was there some assessment of, to Adam's earlier point related to the hotel business, is there some focus in this plan that what we're lacking, to your earlier point about a convention visitor bureau, is there a lack of a facility that's hurting or limiting, really not hurting, but limiting what we can do with that area?
Well, we obviously don't have a convention center, which may or may not be the best choice for the city of Ellensburg, but we have done really well at introducing meeting spaces that can accommodate a larger number. Currently, from talking with the convention spaces, which is your Red Lion down on South Canyon and the Hotel Windrow and CWU's facilities along with the fairgrounds, because there are some meetings that are being held at the fairgrounds. We're still within what we call the medium market. So we're not looking at those large dental association conferences where people come from all over. We're still in that medium sector. So 250, 300 at the most coming in for a convention. So currently right now, the 2 hotels that have a convention space could accommodate those still. It would be a little pressure for them because there's no breakout rooms and different things like that. So infrastructure wise, that's why we in April tried to do, hey, we're a small enough town. People like to come to Ellensburg. Let's get them out for their break spaces, and people enjoyed it. In fact, Issaquah actually is going to do the spring conference in 2023, and they mimicked exactly what Ellensburg did. They're going to meet at a hotel, and then they'll break out in downtown Issaquah for additional spaces. So it's a creative way. We find that tourists that come, whether it's leisure or business, they want an experience to go along with it. And so a lot of those that are remote workers have also indicated in our data, they want to bring their families also. So that gives you a pre-conference activity and possibly a post-conference activity, which is, I think, a gold star for us because we have a lot of activities that we can provide them.
Thank you.
So we do have one more item on our agenda, but before, I just want to kind of close with what I got from this.
Sure.
In addition to the funding for the advertising and visitor information and all of that, the city has a role in infrastructure in terms of Unity Park the integrity of the historic downtown,
Mhm.
uh, our parks and sports fields, arts promotion, which we do, the proposals for a field house, community center, and I got from here, we performing arts
Mhm.
center as well.
Mhm.
Transit has a role, and beautification and signage. And so I just want to kind of expand our thinking. That tourism is kind of all of that. And we have a part in our partnership, there's a lot of other roles the city plays as well. So, and I wish we could go on because I
Yep.
think we could talk about this for a lot longer.
Well, if I could close on, we find collaboration is going to be the key moving forward in resiliency. So I agree with you. Tourism is also an economic development driver, which also has funding available for infrastructure that we can take advantage of or propose in regards to. So I appreciate that feedback and I appreciate all of the questions tonight. We just look forward to meeting with stakeholders and continuing the conversation with the council. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And so at this point, we're not looking to adopt this strategy, but we are kind of looking to implement some elements of it.
Right. So we'll be in negotiation for the next iteration of the agreement with the chamber through the Lodging Tax Committee. And this is just more of an informational session. We didn't propose at this time that the council adopt this. We're a few years into it. And so at this point, just informational only.
But we'll see pieces of it in the contract with the chamber.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. So our second piece is a streeteries policy update.
Yes. So thank you, Council. Heidi Baron Sternaway, your City Manager. And I'm going to start at the end and rather than start at the beginning and try to get us to the end. So this item is before you because we've done some work and wanted to bring it back to you for a bit of discussion before we put the pieces together. Tonight, we're looking for some guidance on a few elements of that. So the streeteries, if you recall, the item came to council in June as an ordinance. Council said we want specifics on what the design guidelines will look like. Within the original ordinance, the proposal was that the Landmarks and Design Commission would create those standards and they would be adopted by council. And those would be the standards that the Landmarks and Design Commission would use to review any future streeteries or parklets that were proposed in the downtown. And the question or the request was for those guidelines to be developed before the item came back to council. So we just finished those and we have Stacy Henderson here, who's our staff for the Landmarks and Design Commission. She can speak with those. There were a few elements that the Landmarks and Design Commission stepped into that would need to be reconciled with the previous version of the ordinance, which was also in your packet tonight. We have not amended that at all. And our recommendation as staff would actually be to marry those two together and bring those back to the Landmarks and Design Commission, just to make sure we achieve the essence of those. And so tonight, our goal wasn't to go through those in detail, but to give you an opportunity to see those and answer questions. Stacy can answer some questions if you have. And the second item was an outstanding issue on whether or not the current streeteries would be required to meet the standards, either immediately or within a reasonable period of time. And we can discuss what that would be. And the third item was if council had any specific direction on the cost or the fee associated with the streeters. The current version had $25 per parking spot per month as the fee. So if there was some direction council had for staff, we would take that. As a reminder, we have a temporary extension on the current streeteries until November 1. At this point, we would need to extend that because we would need to be tonight doing first reading of an ordinance. And so a few moving parts here, but the first question is, did you have any specific questions or have about the guidelines? And then additional about the grandfathering issue and our fees.
Councilmember Monica Miller.
I can start with the grandfathering issue. I feel like the intention was always to be a temporary fix to a temporary problem. And I imagine that that agreement was clear when the streeteries were constructed. So I do feel like the current streeteries would need to come into compliance at some point with the current rules to justify going through all of these regulations in the first place. So that's the grandfather issue. I also feel like that fee is very low. Just when we talk about the cost per square footage for a business to be able to expand their business for such a low first of all, I really value the streeteries. I love them. I love using them. I love them being in our town, but it does feel like $300 a year for one, whatever it is, 200 square feet. I don't know what a parking spot is, but that's crazy good market rate. And to give one business the advantage of having that to expand their business does feel a little bit inequitable. So I would be in favor of increasing those fees to something that was more in line with the market rate, especially given the whole parking issue and the growth pays for growth and things like that. And then finally with that, I also feel like it would be mandatory for them to use those spots. I don't think I saw anything in here that required them to use them consistently, as opposed to just holding on to their lease over the year and using it when they want, and prohibiting another business who may be ready to do that. And then to that point, allowing when the year comes up, I feel like it would be more fair for all businesses on the block to have that same opportunity to enter into, to be able to apply for a permit, and that it wouldn't be a given for one business who formerly had it. So that would allow for new businesses to apply for it or to negotiate with the current business the square footage that is available on each block.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councilmember Elliott.
So specifically to the issue of equity, going to stereo here.
It doesn't make your statement count twice.
Feels like it does.
Hour.
Well, I'm just going to go with it. It feels like, even if we were, I get market rate and that makes sense to me. I don't want it to be punitive. The value to the city as a parking spot is really to the businesses, rather than to the city itself. And so I don't want to look at that as like a, some sort of revenue source. But I do feel very strongly that we've allowed a business, through Fortune to sort of step into an opportunity here that is, sort of a subsidized public opportunity, and we're not allowing anybody in the future, so long as you hold on to that. And I'm 100% against that this has to work on a year, or maybe they bid the streetery on that each year, and the revenues go towards something that's collectively for the downtown or something. But and I realize that that puts the onus on the business, but they can bid more for it next year if it has that value to them. And I think that sets up an equitable, business relationship amongst the businesses, rather than just you were first in line, so you get this incredible deal. That to me is a deal breaker. It has to be equitable. People have to have access to it.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, I agree with both earlier comments. And I know that a lot of the details in the earlier ordinance will get worked out, so I don't want to dive into those. But I spoke to the manager about this last week. I too was really zeroing in on this exemption or the notion that somebody would be exempt. So, you know, there's one section that says that the applicant would be exempt the requirements of the section. And the section is the application permit, right? But then there's another following section that says that the applicant would be exempt from the requirements of the review, which is totally different. So my position is the same. I think that that I also support the idea of allowing existing streeteries to be brought into conformance with the standards that are established, whatever those are. I understand there's a little bit of a different situation with the role of the Landmarks and Design Committee on this or commission, and that, you know, perhaps because these are in the public right of way, that the COA isn't applicable, perhaps because of legal issues. But I think somewhere in there, we need to strike some balance where the sort of working effort of the Landmarks and Design is intact. So in other words, the visual aesthetics of these are ultimately factored into their review. And I know we can get there. And I was thoroughly confused when I read this section number 6 under the permit and application. I talked to the manager about it last week and I still couldn't quite get my head around it, is that this idea that their permits are for 12 months. But if you take a break, you can hold 5 months out, you can reapply. And I think it speaks to Councilmember Elliott's point about sort of effectively cutting line. So I know that's not the intent perhaps, but somehow or another, I think we need to come up with an equitable system and you know, essentially reset the clock every year. And I think that goes back to Monica's earlier point about the fact that these were authorized as temporary facilities and their temporary order, and that the business had no expectation of any permanence, and any ability to recoup that investment should have been, I think the expectation would have been in the first year or 2 years, or by the time this expires, it's 3 years. And I think it'll be different for every business. So that's all I had. I think we're heading in the right direction, but lastly, I think it's really important that this moves back through Landmarks and Design. So that's good to hear.
Anyone else? Adam? Nancy? Awesome food for thought from the 3 of you. Monica, you have more?
Well, I just felt like I should thank Stacy and Jamie for muddling through it, because it's new to us, and by the research that you did from other communities, every community is different and has a different set of standards. So I appreciate that it's a lot of work to create the language and a process that works specific for this community. So thank you.
Yeah, I can just respond by saying that in working with the committee, and I'm sure if Sarah were here, she would remind us that part of it is the expense that some of these folks have had, but to your point, the expectation of being temporary, but then the expense of taking it down. So dismantling it would be quite expensive, and they probably wouldn't put it up again. Was what we got. And to the fee, it was, yeah, I thought we were a little higher than that. We talked about higher fees, but it was kind of how much they thought that they could bear for the current streeteries. But to that point, there were other merchants there who were willing to pay twice as much so that they wouldn't have those, you know, to keep those as parking spaces on the block. So there, I mean,
For their exclusive use or?
right, well, just to keep the, you know, to keep the parking flowing.
Mhm.
Just different needs from different businesses. So, but we have 7 minutes for a break.
Yes.
Do
And I would just say, thank you, council. This is exactly the type of feedback that's really helpful to get, and we'll keep working on this. So thank you.
Thank you.